On today's Locked On Texans podcast, is the O-line still a problem? Not like you may think it is. So we'll dive into how the Houston Texans can protect their offensive line and who has done enough to make this 53-man roster. We dive into that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to this Hump Day episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you to all of our first-time listeners and viewers. You are a new guest in our home. We don't ask for anything but 3 favors, and all you got to do is from your phone. Please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. And thank you to all of our everydayers, you guys that help us, inspire us to come back each and every day to talk Texans to you guys. Thank you for coming back as Cody and myself continue to talk Texans. I am your Texans football analyst, John, some sports guy Hickman. And welcome back, Cody.
Yes, sir.
Welcome back. Detroit news is on.
Yes, sir.
Detroit now.
Hold on, let me say this real quick. I know some people was wondering where I've been the last couple of days. As you can see, different background, which means I officially made the move to Detroit, got here safely. But hey, I'm still representing the H out here, so that's all y'all God needs to know.
He got the hat on. He's still talking Texans. Texans is on his mind. And so that's what we will be talking about today. I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Cody, take us away.
Yes, sir. And on this latest installment of Locked On Texans, look, tomorrow is the first day of joint practices between the Houston Texans and the Los Angeles Rams, which means training camp and preseason are finally coming to an end, and that also coincides with us getting closer and closer to the Houston Texans getting close to finalizing their 53-man roster and their practice squad roster as well. So later on in this show, we're going to talk about who can be this year's version of Khalil Davis, who's going to be that guy when they sign their name on the dotted line just for a training camp tryout, they end up being part of the Houston Texans rotational piece for the 2024 season. And we also going to take a look at other guys who have done enough to make the 53-man roster. But we're going to get this latest installment of Locked On Texans kicked off by looking at whether or not the offensive line is still a problem. And John, I do want to say, first and foremost, I think we can all agree on both sides of the ball. The Houston Texans showed out in Saturday's preseason victory against the New York Giants. And I want to give credit to the offensive line because I like what I saw, especially when you had an opportunity to start 4 out of the 5 guys who was out there performing. I love they had an opportunity to protect all 3 quarterbacks. However, speaking of all 3 quarterbacks, I do want to say this. Maybe on Friday's show, we'll have some fun and see whether or not if Tim Boyle has made enough to be QB number 3. And I only say that because according to Coach DeMeco Ryans, he doesn't know what he wants to do or who he wants to name as QB number 3. So I think that is something we definitely need to keep our eyes on these last couple of days of training camp and preseason. But all 3 quarterbacks had an opportunity to make plays in the pocket. Pocket was clean. I thought the rushing attack looked really good. 114 yards, 32 carries from everybody except for one person, unfortunately. And I know you and SARS already talked about it, so I don't want to get into it. But everybody who had an opportunity to perform in the offensive backfield, they look good. I do want to give credit to the offensive line, but John, I know you still have some concerns.
I do, and the concerns doesn't come by way of wondering whether or not they'll keep C.J. Stroud upright. That's not a concern of mine. And watching the Texans offensive line, the first team that they put out there, no Titus Howard, no Titus Howard against the Steelers, no Shaq Mason against the Steelers. So, you kind of look at that with a grain of salt. But against the New York Giants, an offense that kept their starters out there for 1 quarter, going up against the New York Giants starters, I had no concerns on, man, this may be a tough year for CJ to keep him upright. That's not what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about, guys, if you go back and watch that game, the New York Giants kept their starters on the defensive side out there for an entire half, really for both sides of the ball, offense and defense. So we got a good opportunity to see, okay, what can some of the reserves do? What can Blake Fisher continue to do against starting caliber defensive players in the NFL? And with Blake Fisher, I think he's going to be okay. I think that he's going to go through a development period. Uh, Again, a couple of weeks ago, a few shows ago, I said, hey, I think he's going to suffer from the same issues that Kenyon Green did when he came into the NFL. And that's just being young and not accustomed and ready for the NFL strength. These guys are stronger than Blake Fisher. And you can see it. There's a few times where he just kind of put his hands on somebody and then they just kind of bounced off of him. The initial contact was great. I think the technique was good, but those guys are still strong enough to just move him out of the way, and that's because of youth. And he does need to do a better job of just staying on his feet. He was on the ground a lot, but that's not the real concern. The real concern is in the first half, going up against the Giant starters on the defensive side. The Texans only ran the ball positive for roughly 32 yards. The second half is where you saw Houston gain majority of their yards of the 114. And that's where I sat back as I was watching film and I said, this is why I think we need to talk about it. It's not that they're not going to be able to keep CJ protected. I'm not sure how well this team will be able to run the ball behind this offensive line. And that's because I'm just not sure if Shaq Mason is a good player, don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure how much Shaq Mason can still give this team in the run game. I'm not sure if the combination of Juice Scruggs and Kenyon Green, who was drafted to the Houston Texans to be this team's, run blocker, I'm not sure how much of that combination is now geared towards making sure CJ is upright. Titus Howard has never really been that stout of a run blocker. He's going to make sure that edge rusher doesn't touch the quarterback. Laramie Tunsil is always going to make sure that edge rusher does not touch the quarterback. And I think you can look at it in a good way, a positive way, or a negative way. The positive way is they got an offensive line that's built to protect your franchise quarterback. And in today's game, that's what you want. You want to make sure that when your quarterback 3 steps drop, 5 steps drop, bootleg play action, whatever it is, that quarterback has a better chance to stay upright than get knocked on the ground. The negative way is it looks like, and I'm not making any excuses for Dameon Pierce, that's not what's going on. But it looks like, okay, when Joe Mixon is inserted into that offense, how much of a threat will he be running the ball compared to being able to catch the ball out of the backfield? And that's one of the things Joe Mixon has done well throughout his career. So kudos to Joe Mixon for being able to be a threat in that sense for this offense. I just look at the offensive line and I said to myself, they will not be able to run the ball effectively. That may be unfair because Laramie Tunsil hasn't been out there, but where there's a problem, you see where there's a solution. Because if you guys remember, and I noticed this, I was like, okay, what can they do to move the ball? They were backed up after a penalty to start the game, right? And instead of running the ball, quick pass to Dalton Schultz, quick pass to Brevin Jordan, 13 yards combined there. So Houston went from 1st and 15 to 3rd and 2. That's what this offense may have to do in order to kind of supplement not being able to run the ball effectively. They still only ran the ball for, I think, 3.8 yards per carry. You got better attempts from guys like J.J. Taylor, second half. British Brooks, second half. Cam Akers to close out the first half. Of course, a lot of that is due to Dameon Pierce not being able to run the ball well. 2 yards per carry for Dare Ogunbowale. Jawar Jordan didn't necessarily run the ball well. However, I think, again, what they were able to do to supplement that, him catching out of the backfield, 4 catches for 42 yards. But when they need to move the ball and the deep shots are not there, you can always supplement the quick intermediate passing game to help with that. And then on 3rd and 2, another quick game to Stephon Diggs to pick up the first down, a 9-yard catch. I think that Green is better. Kenyon Green is better. But these in-season reps are really going to be very much needed for him to still go up against strong caliber defensive tackles to help him with his base. I still think at times his base is a little off. And when I look at this offensive line, guys, I'm kind of getting long-winded. I think that throughout the season, they're just going to be the identity of their quarterback. We've seen quarterbacks not be good in this league, and a lot of times that team runs the ball very well. We always go back to the 2000 Ravens. Did not have a good quarterback. Had a great defense. Majority of the time, they were going to hand that ball off. Houston doesn't have that luxury. I don't think so. And I think their luxury is because they didn't build this offensive line because they had a weak quarterback play. If Davis Mills was still the quarterback, we would be in a lot of trouble here in Houston. Houston, we have a problem. CJ is a quarterback. They built that identity around CJ. And with the quick intermediate passing game, you're going to see this team be able to kind of hide the fact that, hey, you know what? We're not tough enough to run the ball in this situation. But we got Dalton Schultz, a reliable option. We got Brevin Jordan, a reliable option. We have 3 monster receivers, a reliable option. We may have John Mechie, a reliable option to get the ball out quickly, to pick up some of those yards that would normally come from running that ball.
We talk about the O-line, but is there anybody on this offensive line who has done enough to make the 53-man roster? More Locked On Texans on the opposite side of the break.
FanDuel has been hooking up their customers. There's no way around it. They are hooking you up. We talked about how they was giving our booster bonus daily throughout the summer. We got something a little different for you guys right now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5. All you're doing is betting $5, and you'll get 3 free weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. So for you guys that live in Houston but may want to catch some of the Chargers games, you can do that. For you guys that may live in Iowa, but you got to check out the Houston Texans, you live and die with Houston Texans, you can do that. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Again, visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Wednesday installment of Locked On Texans. The Houston Texans are back on the practice field later today. So, of course, we're going to bring you guys updates from the Houston Methodist Training Center. Well, John, as I alluded to, tomorrow's the start of joint practices between the Texans and the Los Angeles Rams. Not only that, we are getting closer and closer and closer to the end of training camp, the end of preseason, which means we're getting closer to the Houston Texans 53-man roster for the 2024 season. And there are a couple of players at the top of the list. I'm looking to myself and I'm saying, hey, they definitely have an opportunity to make this roster. John, I've talked about this guy over the last week or so, but I just cannot remove my thinking from when they first signed him. And I'm talking about Cam Akers. Yeah. When they signed him, and I know I said this. I know I was standing right there next to DeMeco Ryans when he was asked about the signing of Cam Akers. And all he said was, we just brought him here to see if he could compete. Plain and simple.
Yeah. And this is a team that believes in competing.
Exactly. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, well, you know, he's coming off another Achilles tear. Listen to what Coach DeMeco said. I believe that first full week of training camp practice, he really didn't take part in the team activities in terms of 7-on-7 or 11-on-11. I was like, oh, well, maybe they just giving him an opportunity just to, you know, get his win back under him and, you know, just so he could put enough film out there so another team could give him an opportunity. 3 weeks later from that statement, the only thing Cam Akers has done was take advantage of his opportunity. Yeah. And with one preseason game left, as of right now, Cam Akers has gave this team something in the passing game, in the rushing attack, with his blocking. And I'm looking at it from the standpoint, and you could kind of say this way of thinking is even more so due to the struggles that we've seen out of Dameon Pierce. But I just can't help. Every time I had an opportunity when I was there to watch Cam Akers start taking on reps with the third team, with the second team, now with the first team, when I had an opportunity to watch Cam Akers perform against the Bears in the last 2 preseason games, every time he stepped out there on the field, he gave this team something. John, as of right now, he is the rushing leader. 59 yards, 17 carries. I cannot sit here and fathom how shocked I am by looking at Cam Akers. And I understand prior to his injuries, you're looking at a guy who was probably part of, in my opinion, a second-tier running back. I can't remember what year it was, but when the Houston Texans were at the bottom of the barrel, I was like, look, if they could sign somebody like Cam Akers, that would be a steal from them. Remember that? But I look at it from a standpoint, man, just knowing how much Bobby Sloyd wants to rush the ball, knowing how much this team is still going to rely on their offensive backfield, and knowing that, once again, due to the struggles of Dameon Pierce, it's basically a window of opportunity for several of these guys. And Cam Akers seems like the guy who's going to be a name that's going to shock everybody.
And you know what? I gotta stay in that running back field. Honestly, we gotta.
I think this is gonna be a running back show.
No, and you know what? Just because simply the guy that got the opportunity just didn't get it done.
Yeah.
And we can cue the violins all we want. You know, we're Houston Texans, so we're down in H-Town, and so those violins may be chopped and screwed a little bit, but the fact is it didn't get done by Mr. Pierce. And the fact is, you got a vet who came in, got it done in Cam Akers. But you also had a couple of rookies that I look and I say, man, with Dare, did Dare really do enough to make this 53-man roster?
I think so. Even though he didn't perform well Saturday, the first 2 preseason games, he did look really good. And you also got to keep in mind, he is valuable for my favorite unit, special teams.
So you look at that and you can make the case for Dare, but of the 2 rookie running backs, British Brooks and Jawar Jordan, and that's kind of funny, BB and JJ, those 2 running backs, and I mean going to practice, training camp, in the game, they gave Houston something in that running game that I think was very important for the Texans and Bobby Sloyd and DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio to see. And by the way, I think that running back field could still use an upgrade. So once the entire league does their major cut down day, there may be some gems out there that can fit Houston in this scheme because scheme matters. But I think one of those running backs deserve a shot to make the 53-man roster. And I think, honestly, because of youth, because of if I go out there and sign another running back, or mainly because of Cam Akers, if he stays healthy, I think Jawar Jordan really deserves a shot to make this roster over Dare Ogunbowale. That may shock a few people, but I like what the young man could do. Didn't necessarily run the ball efficiently Saturday. However, I was extremely impressed with how he was able to be a threat out of the backfield for the Houston Texans. And again, I can't sit here and talk about how I think the offensive line, we say it's still a problem. They won't be able to necessarily run the ball. I can't highlight Joe Mixon's ability of being a pass catcher out of the backfield and not highlight the same thing Jawar Jordan did. Did not run the ball very well behind that Texans. I think he had a long of 7 yards. So now you wonder how many times was he hitting the backfield? Did he get tackled for loss? Before catches for 42 yards, making a couple of guys miss, breaking tackles. That's impressive for a guy that can mirror what the identity of this offense will be. And that's being able to hurt teams in the passing game. When you got the weapons that they do, and it kind of goes back a little bit to last year, you don't have to force the run if it's not there. The run will help this team out a lot. And going to your Cam Akers point, Cody, I think what Cam Akers could do is really help, and Joe Mixon, is really help Houston whenever they want to break off a bootleg. And you kind of play chess with that. We ran the ball well here. We were a threat here. Now we had 2 running backs that has played in our system that you got to respect when they're on the field now, because Cam Akers has looked damn good. and we can bootleg it out. We can hit Brevin Jordan on the bootleg. We can hit K Stover on the bootleg out the backfield. We can do some things. And Jawar Jordan, we can do that with you. Or we can dump it off on a screen pass and you can pick up some yards for us. So I like that for Houston. I think Jawar Jordan is a guy that has done enough to make the 53-man roster. And I'm going to look at a guy that in that cornerback room, I have not been impressed by a lot of guys.
Heck no.
Derek Stingley, I'm not worried about. Kamari Lassiter, in his first game, I thought he played well. Mike Ford, no.
Why is Mike Ford still here? Remember, I told you Mike Ford should never have suited up for the Hall of Fame game, and yet he's still here. That's a blessing for him within itself.
He was that bad during camp. Chris Boyd, have not been impressed. D'Angelo Ross, I've been impressed with. I think D'Angelo is like 5'9", 5'10". Cody, you and D'Angelo may see eye to eye. But
like me and Tank.
Like you and Tank, right? But with D'Angelo, how does it feel to only allow one catch on 4 targets for 10 yards?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to make plays. And granted, it was against the New York Giants' second, third team. That's not the case. The theme for the last couple of weeks is making the most out of your opportunities. That's played well for Cam Akers. That's played well for Xavier Hutchinson. That's played well for John Mechie going back to Saturday. That's played well for Blake Fisher. That's also played well for another guy that I think can be this year's Khalil Davis. But for D'Angelo Ross, guys, when I went back and watched the tape, he made some plays for Houston that the other cornerbacks with their opportunities just simply didn't make. I think he's done enough to make this 53-man roster.
Talking about making the most of your opportunity, that's something Khalil Davis, our guy, did going back to last season. However, we think there are several guys on this roster as of right now who definitely has an opportunity to replicate the undeniable success, the perseverance that Khalil Davis went through last year. I think there are several people on this roster who can definitely do that. We're going to talk about that on the opposite side of this break.
Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Download the Game Time app right now. Download the Game Time app right now. Download the Game Time app right now. I'm a huge fan of it. Cody is as well. Just recently went to go see Janet Jackson because of the Game Time app. It made it literally easy for him. Had a discount on there. And with the Game Time Picks, this new feature, they filter out all of the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You ain't got time for that. We live in a world where we don't got time for it. People, I need a maid. I need a chef. I don't got time to cook. I don't got time to clean. And right now, Game Time is making it to where if you ain't got time to go through all them tickets, don't worry about it. Game Time Picks has exactly what you need, and they'll have you covered. Game Time Picks is a curation that makes it easier to save more on Texans tickets, concerts, comedy, theater events near you. You always get an opportunity to get the view from your seat in the app before you buy, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the Game Time app. Redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, we guarantee it.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this latest installment of Locked On Texans. And Khalil Davis, that is a guy that we literally have been rooting for, I think, about a good 365 days. And John, I believe, when you went out to training camp around this time last year, you kept saying, man, who is that guy, Khalil Davis? Who is this? Who is this? And I started paying attention to him. And as you guys know, there were some injuries on the defensive line. He had an opportunity to not only get his first game, but start in his very first game with the Houston Texans, Week 3, Jacksonville Jaguars game, victory for the Houston Texans. And ever since then, that is a guy who has basically become a reliable foundational piece for Coach DeMeco Ryans on that defensive line. When you talk about this year's Khalil Davis, I'm looking at the undrafted rookie, the undrafted linebacker rookie within itself, Max Tooley. Liking what I'm seeing out of Max Tooley. This is a guy, when I had an opportunity to watch him doing rookie mini camp, OTAs, training camp, and throughout these first 3 preseason games, I've been impressed. You're talking about making the most out of your opportunity during this time in training camp, during this time in preseason. That's what he did. As of right now, 9 tackles, 1 pass deflection, 1 QB hit. And even though I think Lonnie Johnson Jr. had got credit, I think with the interception or maybe the fumble, I can't remember which one it was, Max Tooley was on the opposite side of that play because he's the one.
In that light, I thought Lonnie had just took it out of his hands.
No, I want to say when they showed the replay, Max Tooley kind of got the initial punch on it.
That may have what happened because I do remember Kim.
Oh, you was in the press box. I was watching for the very first time on TV, so I saw the replay. The replay was right there. But, once again, man, I really do. I've really been impressed by Max Tooley. And I think, when you take a look at the quote unquote how thin this linebacker unit has been, especially considering that Christian Harris is still out there on the show. If Coach DeMeco Ryans needs somebody to kind of help that position group, kind of like, keep them afloat a little bit, I think Max Tooley is definitely going to be the guy. I think mid-season we're going to look and be like, man, I didn't expect much from him when the Houston Texans first signed him as an undrafted rookie following the 2024 draft. But at the same time, I truly do believe that he's going to have an opportunity to make somewhat of an impact for this team.
I got to stay in that linebacker group. Before I say mine's Coco, it was coming. You knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. Cody's nickname, Sergeant, I found out over the weekend before he went to Detroit.
Oh, my Coco.
But
listen, don't ever invite friends to family functions.
Please,
plain and simple.
Please invite us. I'm coming with the baby and all. But I want to stay in that linebacker group. And I want to say, you know what? I love the NFL allowing these players to kind of be free with the numbers that they choose. But 13 on the linebacker just looks weird. However,
exactly.
Del'Shawn Phillips has been very impressive to me. He's been popping off the screen, doing some of those small things that I always like to talk about when you look at the players that on the bubble, right? Mm-hmm. How can you edge out the guy that you're competing against on your team by doing some of the small things against the players that you're competing against on the opposing team? And he does a good job of shedding blocks. He flows from sideline to the middle of the field, from sideline to the flats very well, to cover the flats, to cover the curls. He reads and reacts very well, taking on blocks. He's also tough. And he played against the starters for the New York Giants at a point in time before they took their starters out of the game in their first half. He popped off the screen to me. And you kind of look at his story as well. Came into the NFL in 2021. This is his 5th season. Played with the New York Giants. Total of 31 tackles. 11 solo, 20 assisted, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, His last year playing in the regular season was 2023. So we go back to last year. But he's a guy that I think for Houston, it makes sense to keep him around. But mainly because if you guys remember, Khalil Davis did not make the initial 53-man roster.
He was on a practice squad.
He was on a practice squad. So this could be a perfect opportunity for Houston to, evaluate Del'Shawn. A thin linebacker group right now. I think he's played better than Neville Hewitt. I think he's been more impactful and effective than Jake Hansen. He's not young, 5 years in the league, so he has real NFL experience. He may be a guy that if you don't allow him to make that initial 53-man roster, then maybe you keep him around somehow, some way. Or if he goes through waivers, you just keep in contact with him to bring him back. But I also want to look at rookie Jamal Hill. You guys have been asking us about him a lot in the comments. So this past game, I went and just sat and watched him a little bit, and he was popping off the screen. I think for us, Cody, you looked at Max Tooley, linebacker, Del'Shawn Phillips, Jamal Hill, 2 linebackers. I don't know if the confidence is there in the linebacker group, for guys that are specifically linebackers, we have no problem with Azeez. I've been A-OK with Henry To'oTo'o. And I've been judging that group on a scale because Jalen Petre's been around that group and he's been helping them out. But I sit back and I watch and I say, man, some of these guys are just simply better than two of the players that are in front of them. And I think Delshon Phillips, I think Jamal Hill, I think Max Tooley has played better than both Jake Hansen and Neville Hewitt. So I think those three players, good choice, can be this year's Khalil Davis. And shout out to Khalil Davis once again. Khalil Davis cut his hair, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Listen, come on, me and Khalil brothers at this point, right?
Hey man, at least he got the fade, because you know.
Yeah. You got the DeMeco Ryans.
Yes, sir.
But thank y'all for listening to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. It's always good to get my brother back, Cody Davis, while he's up in Detroit. Y'all send him a lot of love. Please subscribe.
And heat is already kind of chilly out here.
Yeah, get ready for it. Please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Also follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at Cody Davis _24. Once again, it's Cody COTY DAVIS _24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.